Hello students, today we are going to discuss the NCERT questions of the chapter The Portrait of a Lady. First we will discuss the questions under the heading Understanding the Text. So here I go. The first question is the three phases of the author's relationship with his grandmother before he left the country to study abroad. So you have to tell the three phases of the author's relationship with his grandmother before he left the country to study abroad. Children, the first phase was his childhood days when he lived in the village with his grandmother. During that time, he shared a very strong bond of love and companionship with his grandmother. The grandmother was the guardian in the village. She used to help him in getting ready for school. She used to escort him to school and they spent maximum time with each other. This was the time their bond was the strongest. So, this was the first phase of their relationship. The next phase was when they shifted to the city and the narrator was admitted to the city school. Now the grandmother could not accompany him to school. She could not help him with his lessons, and also she could not spend much time with the narrator as he got busy with his studies, and there came a gap in their relationship. This was the second phase. The third phase of their relationship was when the narrator went to the university and he got a separate room of his own. Till now, he used to share the room with his grandmother, and now this common link of friendship was also snapped. The grandmother felt very lonely and secluded, but she did not say a word. But there came a wide gap in their relationship. So these were the three phases. First was the village life, second when the narrator was going to the city school, and the third when he went to the university. I think the answer is clear to you. So I move on to the next question. Next question is three reasons why the author's grandmother was disturbed when he started going to the city school. Why was the grandmother disturbed when the narrator started going to the city school? The first reason was now the narrator was taught English words, Western science, the law of gravity, the world being round, Archimedes' principle, and the grandmother could not help him with his studies. So she was unhappy, she was upset. The second reason was in the city school there was no teaching about God, scriptures, or moral values, and the grandmother was really distressed. The third reason was the narrator was imparted music lessons in school, and the grandmother, who was a very conservative woman, for her music had lewd association. She thought it was the monopoly of harlots and beggars and was not meant for gentlefolk. So she was unhappy and upset. So these were the three reasons the grandmother was upset when the narrator started going to the city school. Let's move on to the next question. The next question is three ways in which the author's grandmother spent her days after he grew up. How the narrator's grandmother spent her time when he grew up and she could not help him. The grandmother used to sit by the spinning wheel and used to spin the thread. She spent her time in spinning on the spinning wheel. Second, she was always busy reciting her prayers. And the third one is during afternoon she used to take half an hour break and used to feed the sparrows breadcrumbs. So these were the activities in which the grandmother occupied herself when the author grew up. The next question is The odd way in which the author's grandmother behaved just before she died. The odd way or the unusual way in which the author's grandmother behaved just before her death. What did she do? On the day the narrator arrived from abroad, the first time the narrator's grandmother did not pray. She omitted her prayers and celebrated her grandson's return by taking an old dilapidated drum, calling the women of the neighborhood, and she sang the songs. She was really happy. The narrator himself says that this was the first time in his life when he saw his grandmother did not pray and she had a change in her routine. So this was the odd way, and then she got busy with her prayers and immediately she passed away. Okay. Now, next question is the way in which the sparrows expressed their sorrow when the author's grandmother died. Now, the grandmother used to feed the sparrows every day. They were very friendly with the grandmother. They used to come and perch on her legs, on her head and shoulders. But the day the grandmother passed away, thousands of sparrows assembled near the corpse, which lay covered in red shroud. But that day the sparrows were quiet, they were silent, there were no chirrupings. Every day, there used to be a veritable bedlam of chirrupings. There would be a noisy, chaotic scene due to the chirrupings of the bird. But that day, the birds did not chirrup. And when the narrator's mother gave them breadcrumbs like the grandmother used to give, they did not eat the bread. And when the narrator's grandmother's body was taken away for cremation, the birds also flew away silently. This is how the sparrows they paid their homage, their silent tribute to the grandmother. I hope the answers are clear to you children. These are short answer questions. The word limit for these questions is 30 to 40 words. Okay. Now I move on to the other questions under the heading talking about the text. Here the first question is the author's grandmother was a religious person. What are the different ways in which we come to know this? This is a quite simple question. There are several examples in the story to show that the grandmother was a religious person. From the starting, if we see, the grandmother used to hobble about the house with one hand giving support to her stoop, and in other hand she always held a rosary and her lips were constantly busy reciting the prayers. Then another example is the grandmother used to escort the narrator to the school since it was attached to a temple, and while the children learned their lessons, the grandmother used to sit in the temple and read scriptures. Then, in the city, the grandmother was always busy reciting her prayers. Another example is when the narrator was going abroad and she came to say goodbye to him at the railway station, and even when he returned and she was at the station to receive him, even on those moments she was lost in her prayers. And at last we find that she was busy reciting her prayers and telling the beads of her rosary when she passed away. So she was a very religious woman and was always busy in her prayers. Next question is describe the changing relationship between the author and his grandmother, and did their feelings for each other change? The changing relationship, you can tell about the three phases that in village they used to share a very strong bond, but with changed circumstances in the city, there came a gap in their relationship. The narrator was busy with his studies and they both could not spend much time with each other, and then the narrator went to the university and got a private room of his own and they could not meet with each other. So with the changed circumstances and the passage of time, there came a gap in their relationship, but their feelings for each other did not change. The grandmother loved the grandson very much. She always showered her love on the grandson. She was so fond of him that, in spite of being extremely old, she waited for the grandson's return from abroad, celebrated his return, and the next day she passed away. It appeared as if she was just waiting for him to come back safe and sound, and after seeing him, she passed away. So she loved him very much. And as far as the author is concerned, the narrator is concerned, he also loved his grandmother very much, and he also had a great respect for his grandmother. Okay. Next question is, would you agree that the author's grandmother was a person strong in character? If yes, give instances that show this. I think the grandmother was really a very strong woman. In village, she was alone and she used to look after the narrator very well. She was the sole guardian in the village. She used to look after all his needs and his studies. Then in the city also, we see that she was a very strong woman and she had a good control over her emotions. In the city, when she came to know that he was getting music lessons in school, although she did not like it, but she did not say anything. She had a good restraint over her emotions. When the narrator got a separate room of his own and the common link of friendship was snapped, the grandmother she felt very lonely, but she accepted this seclusion, this loneliness without uttering a word. She never expressed her displeasure or any emotions. She just kept quiet. And when the author took the decision to go abroad for his higher studies, he said that the grandmother was so old and he knew if he told this to the grandmother, she would be really upset because at her age one can never say. But when the grandmother came to know this, she did not say anything. She did not show any disapproval or any displeasure. She kept quiet. She was not sentimental at all. Rather, she came to say goodbye to him at the railway station and she also came to receive him. All these instances show that the grandmother was a really strong woman. Okay? Next question is, have you known someone like the author's grandmother, and do you feel the same sense of loss with regard to someone whom you have loved and lost? Now children, this question is based on your personal experience. Have you known somebody like the author's grandmother? You can discuss about your grandparents and if you felt that same bond with somebody and did you lose that person and did you feel that same sense of loss or grief in regard to that person. So this is completely based on the personal experience and you will have to write it yourself. I hope these questions are clear to you, and if you have any doubts or queries you can ask me in the live sessions. Thank you children.